Hi, everyone. May peace be on you all, and welcome to another episode of I'm a Muslim and That's Okay. And I'm your host, Shala, as always. And I am back with this season's very first The Whole Muslim. And it is my pleasure to introduce Ustadh Tabari Zahir. You are the founding director of the Lamps of Light. I've been trying to get a hold of him since forever now because I have so much admiration for what Lamps of Light does. So please, Ustadh Zahir, tell us a little about yourself. And you specialize in, I'm sorry, I'm not going to cut you off, but you specialize in treating addictions within Muslim communities. And I think that's so fantastic. But please tell us, that's not the only thing. What else should my audience know about you?
Yes, so thank you, Shahla, for having me on. I'm happy to be here. And to answer your question, Lamps of Light is so it's the Lamps of Light Project, and
Hmm.
we are a nonprofit that's been set up to prevent, do early interventions and treatment of chemical and behavioral addictions.
Hmm.
Um, and so, that's what the organization is. Now, how we got there is, when I was going through grad school back in 2017, um, I was actually supposed to go and do my internship, at a reentry
Mm.
organization, that services people that just came home from prison.
Oh, wow.
And like one day before I showed up to the site, I found out that the guy who did all the training and everything and was going to be my supervisor,
Mm.
he had quit.
Oh,
And
wow.
so the college, the program coordinator, they called me and said, "Yeah, we got to find you a different place and
Mm.
everything." And it took them about 2 weeks to find me another placement. And when they found another placement, it was an inpatient treatment facility. So
Mm.
it was, it was a place where people go to detox off of substances,
Right.
and at the same time they receive treatment for some dual diagnosis. So it's like they're struggling with alcohol, but they also have depression. They're struggling with
Ah, I
cocaine,
see.
but they also have anxiety, right?
Hmm.
So it was this dual, thing going on, and they would receive treatment for both. So I was in there, I mean, it was less than a week,
Mm.
and I was just like, oh no, Muslims need this.
Oh, yeah.
Muslims need this. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So that's how the idea kind of just concretely just sat on me. From that point on, I started asking the director a lot of questions
Mm.
about, like, how to start something like this. What are the problems? What did he um, think about, something like this for Muslims? Because he was also treating Muslims, right?
Right,
He
right.
himself was like, he was African American, and he
Hmm.
told me, I've been baptized and I've taken my shahada
Oh,
because
wow.
his stepfather, yeah, right, like, I mean, you can't make this stuff up, you know what I
Right.
mean? And so he was like, his stepfather was a Muslim,
Ah,
and his stepfather took him to the masjid and, introduced him, to the Muslim way of life and
right.
everything. And so he ended up also, taking his shahada. He wasn't a practicing Muslim, but he was just letting me know, look, I understand the Muslim population
Right,
because I spent years around them.
right, right.
And so I would ask him questions about, like, what did he think about how this would go with the Muslim community. He gave me sound advice,
Mm.
right? He gave me sound advice about just a variety of things. Like, just to give you an example, the stigma that's
Right,
around, like it's much stronger in the Muslim community
right,
because of this idea of substances being haram. And
right.
so Muslims have more of a reluctance to talk about it, to confess, that they're using substances, or to, like, go into depth about it. And so he was absolutely right about that. And that's one of the things that we work on at Lamps of Light, is eradicating stigma.
Mm.
Like, how do we, you know, um, about 25 years ago, right? Just to kind of give your audience some context, about 25 years ago, even mental health in the Muslim community was kind of like, Uh, yeah, we
For
really don't want to
sure.
talk about that. You know what I
For
mean?
sure.
So, but as more and more Muslims became therapists,
Mm,
and more Muslims, became counselors, and they
mm,
got their doctorate in psychology and their PhDs in psychology, start doing research and stuff like that. Now, like every community has therapists. Every
right.
community has some type of organization that's working with mental health.
Right.
My goal is to do the same thing with addictions,
Right.
right? Because, usually you'll always find that the original the you have the present case, which may be addictions,
Right.
but the underlying factor
Mm-hmm.
is usually trauma, right? There's some
Mm-hmm.
type of trauma, there's some type of neglect,
Right.
there's some lack of meaning, there's some lack of purpose, and that's what you're really dealing with.
Right.
That's what you really have to work on with the person. And then the addiction will kind of go away. You know what I mean? I mean, you
Right.
may have some dependency issues and things like that, right? But that's what Lamps of Light is all about.
Mm.
That's what we focus on. As far as myself is concerned, um, I um, I'm a chaplain. I'm a Muslim
Yeah,
chaplain
I
here
was
in
reading that at
Southern
UCLA.
California.
Yes.
Yeah, at UCLA. Yeah, so we have a huge Muslim population there.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably close to about 1,000 Muslims on campus, and they have their own struggles. They have their
Right.
own need for guidance and
Mm,
advice and things like that. Sometimes they need representation, like
mm.
religious representation in
Right.
certain spaces, and that's my job, to provide that. But I'm also, I've had some training in like Islamic law. I've
Mm.
traveled the Muslim world. I've studied with scholars. I've studied at institutions both here and abroad, and that has put me in kind of like in a religious leadership space also. So
Right.
like I give the Friday sermons.
Right.
For non-Muslims, it would be the equivalent of your Sunday sermon.
Right. Right.
I give that every Friday. I'm somewhere at a different mosque or masjid or Islamic center, giving the talk, giving the Friday sermon. I also do things like couples counseling.
Mm.
I do a lot of mentoring. I do a lot of talking to the youth, just kind of trying to help them to live in this time period,
Mm.
because just as somebody who has thousands and thousands of hours counseling people
Mm.
and helping people to work out their problems, I realize that we're in a very unique time.
Right.
All right, the time that we're living in, human beings have never had this. We've never experienced this type of situation before. So, for example, we've never had a time where you could hold a device in your hand
Mm-hmm.
and it presents to you ideas.
Mm.
It presents to you worldviews.
Mm.
It presents to you temptations
Mm-hmm.
that humanity has never had access to before.
Mm-hmm.
There has never been a time in human history where somebody could hold a device in their hand and see millions and millions and millions of pictures of naked people. That
Mm-hmm.
has never happened before.
Right.
And so it's like we have to be genius about how we go about helping our youth to navigate the time that we're in.
Right.
Right. And it was like, I was just lucky enough to have lived a, I guess you could say, rebellious lifestyle at one time in my life.
Right. Right.
And I get it, right?
Right.
Like you're nobody's gonna say something to me that I haven't like experienced.
Right.
I haven't I haven't seen. I haven't been exposed to. And I think the youth, especially the Muslim youth, they know that they can come to me. They can talk about anything.
Right.
They can confess anything, and there's no judgment,
Right. Right.
right? Because I've been there, done that. You know what I
Right.
mean? And hopefully, we can talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. And
We can
that's the
talk a little bit
thing.
more about that. So
I think in religious spaces, I can only speak to Muslim, but I have many non-Muslim friends. It's largely the same thing that children feel so hesitant, and not even just children, like grown-ups, admitting to the fact that they have an addiction to something, or that they're not sure how to manage as you said, either trauma or mental health condition, it's very difficult to do because the narrative of mental health and addiction counseling is so new. So, I mean, I think that's where a lot of religious spaces like still need help, especially the kind of help that you offer, and the our kids basically, that they are able to come to you at least and be able to be open about literally anything, because addictions come in many forms. That we had this discussion, like what we think of addiction is substance addiction. I think the
Right.
other one that has sort of come up within Muslim communities is addiction to porn.
Right.
But
Right.
anything, you can be addicted to literally anything. You can be addicted to shopping, you can be addicted to food. It is a matter of getting to the bottom of it and why it is. So I think I want to ask is, if you had like a case by case situation, let's say if it was supposed for somebody who had substance abuse, how would lamps of light help them?
Mm, good question. So I'm gonna back up a little bit,
Mhm.
and I'll just make a few comments on on some of the things that you said. Um, there's a couple of reasons why the stigma around addictions are so pernicious, right? They're just, like people just cling on to this idea that, if you're an addict, you're automatically bad.
Right, right.
Number one, the dominant model on dealing with addictions, especially substance abuse,
Mm.
is that it is a disease. All
Mm.
right.
Right.
So when you go to SAMHSA, the website,
Mm.
United States Department of Health and Human Services, and you go to their major program that funds billions of dollars of programming,
Hmm.
all across the nation and across the world,
Right.
their dominant paradigm, the model that they put forward,
Mm.
is that it is a disease.
Right.
All right. So you have some people that's like, okay, well, if it's a disease, I can never get rid of it.
Mm.
All right. So sometimes that's what it is. Like to say that a person has an addiction is like telling them that they have HIV.
Right.
They have something
Right.
that you just can't get rid of it, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter how you got it,
Right.
you can never get rid of it.
Right.
I don't use that model at all,
Hmm.
right? Because it's starting to, even the state of California is starting to put out different literature because they're realizing that it has been very harmful,
Right.
to say that every addiction is at the level that it has to be treated like a disease, and that's
Mm.
just a lie. It's
Right.
not. You know, it can reach that
It
level,
can. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It
It
can, where
can.
the brain is altered, if there's irreversible damage, but most addictions are not that.
Right.
Number two, so that's my first point. That's for the general American population.
Mm.
My second point is within the Muslim community, um, we have, just so your listeners can understand that, Islam is a comprehensive way of life.
Mm.
Like we have our belief system.
Right.
We can take every single human action and give it a religious classification.
Mm.
All right. Every human action, just me sitting here talking to you, I can say this is mubah, right? It's neutral,
Right.
right? It's right. It's not righteousness, nor is it unrighteousness.
Right.
It's just regular human behavior,
Right.
right? Um, and so when we start talking about substances
Mm.
or pornography or something else that a lot of us don't want to be associated
Mm-hmm.
with, the first thing that comes to the Muslim mind is that this is haram.
Right.
It's forbidden,
Forbidden. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So we give it a negative religious ruling.
Ruling. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
And for good
Yeah.
reasons,
Mm.
right? Because we're supposed to try to stay away from these things.
Right.
But the problem with that is this. That is not the proper way, even within our religion,
Mm.
of dealing with dealing with problems. You're dealing with people that have problems.
Right, right,
That is not the way.
right.
I'll give you an example. Um, the people were brought to the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, that and they were addicted to alcohol. He had more than one companion
Right,
that was like literally addicted to alcohol.
right.
And after this one guy kept being brought to the Prophet Muhammad, like we keep finding this guy drunk. One of his other companions says something like, the English equivalent would be like, "May God damn you."
Right, right.
Why do you keep coming here like
Right,
this? And the Prophet Muhammad said, don't say that, because the only thing that I know about him is that he loves God and he loves the messenger of God. Right? And in another narration, he said, don't help the devil against your brother.
Right.
Like, don't say something to him that's going to disparage him.
Right.
Don't say something to him that's going to, discourage him. Don't do that, because you'll be helping the devil. I won't be helping your brother. Right. So in this concept of seeing the best in people is known as ihsan. Right. It's a spiritual virtue to be able to see, no, this is, as long as a human being is living, he has the potential, he has the possibility of changing, of improving. And we never give up on the individual.
Right.
But that is not the default conversation. That's not the default position that we have as, like this new American Muslim community, right? We either speak about it from a position of belief, right? Like, what does God want? What does God's messenger want?
Right.
We either speak about it as addiction. I'm talking about. We either speak about it as, what does God want? What does the messenger of God want? What is the religious ruling? Right? The religious ruling is that it's forbidden. Right? But we never make the next jump, which is, how do we help this person? Right? And that is where the spiritual virtue will come in at.
That's
right?
that is a huge pet peeve of mine, but please continue.
Yeah. And so that is what we have to do. That's what we have to do as a community. We have to revive the science of ihsan, this spiritual virtue. We have to revive it, because it is a science within our religion. It's a whole science. You can study it for 10 years. You can get a PhD in this topic, if you want. If you go to a Muslim university, you can get a PhD in this topic. But when you come and you talk to most everyday Muslims, or even sometimes imams, you're right, the equivalent of like a pastor.
Yes.
If you talk to them, it won't even come up, right? Like this idea of having preferring this person, and recognizing their humanity, and not helping the devil against your brother or your sister. We have forgotten these things. We have forgotten these things. And for there's a lot of reasons why, like I would say 1/3 of our community are immigrants, and they come from countries where, in their country, nobody has seen alcohol for 300 years, right?
Like, I would stop you there, Ustadh Zahir. It's not about, and I coming from like a strictly immigrant background. I was raised in Pakistan. It's just the same problem as it is over here. I remember every year I would read without fail, some like 300 people would die every year in Pakistan drinking moonshine. So poison moonshine, so it was there. It's just that if you don't acknowledge it, you can pretend it doesn't exist, sort of situation is how we sort of put it.
No, I was speaking in general. Like, I'm just saying, like, like if you come, like, especially in America, a lot of the immigrants that came here from Muslim countries, it's not like Europe. See, in Europe, a lot of the Muslim immigrants were just workers. But in America, they were highly educated, and they came from families that were highly educated. And so their idea of being this upright citizen and, these ideas of what it is to be high class
Right.
it has nothing to do with substances,
Right.
right?
For
Whereas
sure.
in America, it's as American, drugs
As
and
apple pie.
alcohol is as American as hamburgers and apple pie. It's, you know what I mean? And
Right.
so that's the issue that we're dealing with. But once you get into the second generation
Mm.
and the third generation, they're American.
Right.
And if they have anything to do with popular culture, whether
Right.
the movies,
Right.
whether the music,
Mhm.
whether the way they hang out,
Yeah, yeah.
the way that they have fun, they're going to get exposure.
Of
So then the
course.
question is how do we deal with it?
Right.
Right? Like how do we deal with it?
Right.
Now, to go back to your original question, I know I take long routes
No,
now
I appreciate it
uh,
completely.
to answer the question. So, the way that my
Mm.
go-to in dealing with people who suffer from addictions is what I call harm reduction.
Mm.
All right, harm reduction. The goal might be abstinence, right?
Right.
Usually, if somebody's coming to you and they're like, "This is ruining my life, it's
Right.
ruining my
Right. Right.
marriage," you know what
Right.
I mean? Or okay, so of the, you know, eventually they want to be completely abstinent from
Right.
either the chemical
Right.
or the behavior.
Right.
But the human being, it takes time
Right.
to accomplish their goals.
Mm.
It takes time to reach, that goal of abstinence.
Right.
Not more than that.
Mm.
More than that, um, it it is a Quranic concept, right? It's a Quranic concept that it is the normative practice of God that He takes human beings from stage to stage,
Right.
right?
Right.
You don't go from being a walnut seed
Mm-hmm.
and then the next day you're a tree.
Right.
It just doesn't work
Doesn't
like
work
that,
that
right?
way.
Right? You start off as a
Right.
seed, you water that seed, it becomes a stalk,
Right.
and then that stalk becomes a plant,
Mm.
and then that plant, continues to grow, and over time it becomes a walnut tree,
Right.
right? The human being is the same way.
Right.
What happens is we start doing these things, right? We get involved in things. It might be substances, it might be shopping, it might be online gambling, it might be pornography,
Right.
and it starts off as a seed.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then you continue to do it either because there's a pleasurable experience
Mm.
or it's solving some problem for you.
Right.
All right? It's solving a problem. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be addicted to X
Right.
or Y.
Right.
Nobody does that. But, to drink alcohol is easier and it will solve all your problems in 1 hour. In 1 hour, you're going to have a buzz. You're not going to have anxiety anymore.
Right.
You're
Right.
not going to be depressed anymore.
Right.
You're not going to be thinking about where's your money coming from anymore. So it's solving a problem. The issue is that long term,
Mm.
you're going to have worse problems.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So when someone comes to me, my thing is this. All right. You're addicted to alcohol. You've been drinking alcohol nonstop for 12 years.
Mm.
All right. Number one, it will be harmful for me to just say, just stop.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because people die from just coming off of alcohol just like
Right.
that sometimes.
And it's
right?
also not.
So
It's not realistic. For those
it's
who've
not
never
realistic.
been addicted to it, it's not realistic. You can't come. We can't even get off our coffee for a day. So I mean, alcohol is something
Right.
bigger.
Right. Exactly. So my thing is this. Okay, how many beers do you drink a day?
Mm.
So they'll say, oh, I drink 12. I'll drink a whole 12 pack
Yeah.
by myself. I'm like, okay. So tomorrow, we're just going to drink 11.
Hmm.
All right?
Right.
Tomorrow, that's it.
Right.
Right? I just want you to drink 11. Just give up one.
Right.
And he won't even notice it. He
Right.
won't even notice it.
Right. Right.
But the body notices it.
Hmm.
And eventually, we're going to walk that down. We're going to walk it down. We're going to walk it down to where he's only drinking one beer. He's gotten used to just drinking one beer. And eventually, he'll be able to give it up over time. I've done it too many times. No one can tell me this doesn't work. No one can tell
Right.
me that
Right.
because I have many, many success cases.
Mm-hmm.
And I do the same thing with pornography,
Right.
right? Or whatever it is.
Right. Right.
How many hours are you consuming a day of
Right.
pornography? He'll say, oh, 2 hours,
Right.
right? I watch 2 hours of pornography a night. Okay. Tomorrow, you're only going to watch an hour and 45 minutes.
Right.
All right. You may relapse. You may go back to 2 hours. You may go to 2.5
That's what
hours,
I wanted to ask. That,
right?
because with addiction, this is a very common thing. Like, let's say if it was alcohol addiction, I'm down to 2 bottles a day, and then I
Right.
get stressed
Okay.
at work, and I'm like chugging my fourth, fifth on that day. What does a patient do then? Where does a patient start at that point?
So the first thing that they need to understand is they haven't lost anything.
Ah, I
All
see. I
right.
see.
You haven't lost anything. Or
Mm.
yes, you relapsed.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You fell back into a habit,
Right.
but you now know
Mm.
that you can get down to 2 a day.
Right. Right.
You know it now.
Right.
Right. So now we're going to focus on your strength.
Mm-hmm.
Your strength is you can substitute something else for those 10 other beers. We got it down to 2.
Right. Right.
Because at the same time you're replacing the habit. You're going to replace the habit, right? You're going to find out before you started drinking, what was it that you loved to do?
Right.
Right? Like, what did you give up as a result of drinking? And everyone that has an addiction has given up something that they love.
Right.
It might be time with family. It might be time in public. It might be reading more. Okay. So when you give up that small portion of addiction, we have to create new neural pathways.
Right.
Right? Because right now, you have a wide open highway in your brain that's just saying, man, step on the accelerator, man. We need this many beers. You
Right.
already know,
Right.
right?
Right.
So what we need to do is we begin to build a new highway. We're
Mhm.
building a new highway that's going to love something else just as much as you loved alcohol or pornography or online gambling. All
Right.
right. So as you're taking something away, you're replacing it with something else, but you're doing it very slowly.
Mm.
You're doing it in manageable amounts.
Right.
And if you ever jump back on the wrong highway, it's okay.
Mm.
There's going to be an exit, right? We're gonna take an exit and we're gonna get on the other highway.
Right.
All right. And the truth of the matter is, most people relapse about 7 times. All right. So whoever the counselor is, whoever the mentor is, they got to start off knowing this.
Right.
All right. There's 2 things that I always tell my clients. Number 1, we have to have a very open and honest relationship.
Right.
I cannot help you, and you cannot help me to help you if you're not going to tell me the truth.
Right.
If you're not going to tell me the truth, I don't care what the truth is, but I need to know it.
Right. Right.
All right. I need to know what the truth is.
Right.
When you relapse, I need to know, because I need to learn I need to understand what your habits are.
Right.
Right. I don't want us to be, shooting in the dark. I want to understand who you are. I want to know what your motivations are. I want to know what's driving you, what your triggers are. I need to understand all of that before I can give you a treatment plan, because we may have to adjust the treatment plan, but I will only know that if you're honest with me. So that's the first thing.
Right.
The second thing that I tell them is 9 times out of 10, you're going to relapse. You might have 5% of people who they don't relapse. Once they get on a track, they don't relapse.
Which
but that's
is
rare. That's
yeah.
rare. Yeah. So that's it. That you're going to relapse.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, so when it happens, let's talk about it. Let's talk about, okay, where were you at? What happened?
Right.
What was the trigger?
Right.
How strong were the impulse? How strong was the impulse?
Right. Right.
How strong was the drive? Did you try to stop? For how long? What made you finally give in? Like, so we have to understand the relapse.
Right.
Then we can begin to build barriers against it. And so in a nutshell, that's my method.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's my method. And, we have many cases, like even now on my staff, I have someone, I worked with him for about a year to overcome, a particular addiction. And now he's completely addiction free.
Oh,
and
great.
I use him to help other people.
Right.
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 Because, so like when I get another client, I'll do the therapy session, but throughout the week, he's the hype man. He's calling them, hey,
Yeah.
how was it? What's going on? Where are you at with such and so and so?
Right, right.
Right? Because I just can't call him every day,
Right,
right?
right.
But I can have my my peer recovery specialist, he can call them
Right.
and say, all right, where we at? Okay, this is part of your treatment plan. How you feeling today? You know what I mean? How'd you feel yesterday?
Right,
Oh
right.
yeah, all right, tell me more about that.
Right.
And he'll just spend 15 minutes just talking to him, keeping him on the right highway
And I
and
think
and trying to block
I think
the
that's so
exits to the wrong
important
highway.
because
Yeah,
when you're an addict, you feel very lonely because you're going through this
yeah,
alone. There's a whole lot of guilt associated with this. And that
yeah,
brings me to my
yeah.
second question. Um,
Hmm.
Addicts, when you're talking about in general, are rarely solitary units. They are parts of communities, families. Um, and whether they're from religious families or not, is one of those very touchy things that when somebody finds out that a particular family member is an addict, the first things that they do is they pull away. Um, do you counsel family to help them help the addict?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that probably happens more times than I'm actually. And I'm very very careful about language. So
Right.
I don't call people addicts, right?
Mhm.
I say that they are someone challenged with an addiction,
Right,
right?
right, right.
Because if you say addict, that's all you're going to see them as,
Right, right,
right?
right, right.
They are only that problem, and it's
Right.
like, no, everybody is more than that particular problem, right?
That's true.
So I say, someone challenged with an addiction. So
Hmm.
when usually it's the family that calls me first.
Okay.
Usually,
Okay.
right? I would say 65% of the time,
Mm.
it's the family member calling me saying, "Hey, my husband needs help. My daughter needs help.
Mm.
My sister needs help. My brother needs help."
Right.
Right? They're the ones calling me. And the first thing I want to understand is, what is the family dynamic?
Mm.
All right, because I don't want to treat the person who has malaria and then send him back into the malaria swamp,
Yeah.
meaning the family,
Yeah.
right? So I want to drain the swamp
Right.
first, or at the same time that I'm doing the treatment, because a lot of times the family has their uh, troubles, they have their
Right.
problems, they
Right.
have their dysfunction,
Right.
and this person is the most sensitive in the family,
Right.
and they're falling through the gaps.
Right.
They're
Right.
falling through the gaps. So the family is calling me saying, "Fix my son," and then later on I'll find out it's not your son. It's not just your son, right? You know what I mean? Like, there might be verbal abuse in the
Right.
family that
Right.
he's more sensitive to, or she's more sensitive to,
Right.
than everybody else was. Everybody else was able to deal with it, but he's not able to deal with it. The way he deals with it is he smokes marijuana.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because the household is toxic.
Right.
So yes. Now, this is just, and I'm just giving you generalities
Mm.
for the sake of time. Normally it goes like this in a family. The family deals with a particular addiction one way. Either they are completely indulgent. They're
Mm.
just like, okay, Ahmed or Muhammad or Fatima, she has a problem.
Right.
And we're just going to just give her everything that she wants, and hopefully the problem will go away.
Mm.
All right. So they are actively endorsing
Right.
the addiction,
Right.
right? Normally it's money,
Mm.
or you let them use the car to go where they want to go, to do what they want to do,
Right.
right? And so there's no accountability there,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that's one extreme. The other extreme is usually they just berate the person,
Right.
right? They just talk bad about them, right? They just only, they can only see their problem, their faults. They can't see anything else, all
Right.
right? And both of those situations are going to keep the person right where they are,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right where they are. So what my job is my job is to come in and tell them, you got to break away from these extremes.
Mm-hmm.
you you have to your role must be this.
Right.
You have to be able to say to your family member, I see you have a problem.
Mm.
I see you have a problem. I cannot carry those bags for you.
Right.
Right? I just can't.
Mm-hmm.
All right? I am not gonna, we're not gonna have this codependent relationship where I'm like, I will only be okay if you are completely okay, right? Like, we're
Mm.
not gonna have that relationship, nor are we gonna have the relationship that's just like, I'm gonna give you money every time you ask for it.
Right.
I'm
Right.
gonna give you the car every time you ask for it.
Right.
And I know you're getting ready to go get in trouble,
Right.
right? But what I'm going to do for you is I'm gonna walk alongside you,
Mm.
you while you're carrying your bags.
Mm-hmm.
I will help you as much as I can,
Right.
but I am not going to carry those bags for you. All right?
Right.
I'm not
Right.
going to do it. And every family, this is going to look different. The
Mm.
way that you walk alongside the one that needs help, it's going to look a little bit different. Sometimes you'll have a family member that's like, listen, I don't care what it costs. I'll pay for everything. I'll pay for the treatment. But I don't want to be part of the counseling sessions or whatever, right? So that it looks like that sometimes in a family,
Right.
right? In some other families, it's like um, uh, they actually have to learn how to communicate in a way
Right.
that's
Right.
healthy.
Right.
And I would say that most of the time is that. Most of the time is that. It's they don't know how to communicate
Right.
in a way that is helpful.
Healthy. Yeah.
They're so used to communicating in dysfunctional ways,
Right.
and they don't know how to bridge that gap.
Mm.
And so you'll be surprised how I have to reteach parents how to talk to their children.
Right.
And sometimes, I mean, there's cultures.
Mm.
There's some cultures that they call their kids dogs,
Oh yeah.
right? They'll call their kids donkeys.
Right.
They'll call their kids animals.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that does something to the self concept of a person.
Right. Right.
And how do they escape that for a lifetime? If
Mm.
they suffered that for 15 years straight, and then somebody gives them a hit of marijuana, and then they feel good, that just solved their problem.
Right.
The
Right.
marijuana just solved their problem. So every time they feel stress, every time they feel disrespected, every time they feel neglected, they're going to go to the marijuana. And
Right.
sooner or later, it's going to become a problem.
Right.
Sooner or later, it's going to be an issue.
Ab-
And so
yeah.
that's my standard, modus operandi.
Right.
That's my
Right.
way of, understanding the family and then just helping them to become more functional so that they can help the one that needs the most help.
Right.
That's normally
Right.
how I do it.
So I
Yeah.
think my next question is that we've touched on about the kind of addictions that you treat, your methodology, but it all comes back to the same thing. A lot of the times, I would say, I guess majority of times, the addiction is caused by trauma. Do you work in any spaces for trauma reduction? Because, like, coming from, like, again, I'm Pakistani, we come from a heavily colonized part of the world. Colorism is a kind of thing. A lot of women are berated for not being tall enough, not being white enough, not being pretty enough. It creates its own
Mm,
kind of trauma. And there's lots of different
mm.
kinds of traumas that it come into immigrant families for various different reasons. So, do you work with trauma reduction of that sort?
Yeah, yes, of course, right? So, there's different types of trauma. You have,
Hmm.
like you have like PTSD, you
Right.
have CPTSD, which is like complex, like something happened over and over and over
Right.
again with a person. Yes, any addiction specialist has to also be, they have to specialize in trauma because
Right.
that's going to be the underpinning in situation. That's going to be the underpinning problem.
Right.
And so, I have my own method, of dealing with, people who have, they've experienced some type of trauma, or they are, from the past, or they're in a situation right now where they're constantly being traumatized. Um, I normally start off with, um, you know, um, understanding. Okay, what's motivating you?
Right.
You know what I mean? Just what's driving you? Okay, and you want to get down to this issue, right? You want to get down to, okay, you came to me, you want help. Why? Know your why.
Hmm.
What's driving you to overcome your symptoms of trauma,
Right.
right? So that's the first thing I work on. The second thing I work on is, okay, now let's make that into your intention.
Mm.
Intention is everything,
Right.
and as you know, as part of our religion, like this is the most important thing, right? People, actions are defined by intentions.
Right.
All right, like what did you intend? All right, so your intention is to overcome your trauma. Okay, that's the second thing, and this might take me 3 sessions, 4 sessions of like really, really getting down into just formulating an intention, because that's what's going to carry you over the next 20 sessions, the
Mm.
next year. That's what you got to have that in place, because when they lose motivation, when they lose sight, when other things come up, you got to come back to that original, the why
Right.
and the intention.
Right.
So that's where I always start at. The very next thing that I do is I teach them how to, the somatic experiencing, right?
Mm.
Just being in your body,
Right.
because you're gonna feel the effects of trauma in your body.
Right.
You're gonna, the way you breathe, the way your nervous system reacts. Sometimes you might sweat, sometimes you
Mm.
might just start break down and just start crying,
Hmm.
right? All of the symptoms are in the body.
Right.
So we have to begin to learn the body, or sometimes relearn the body.
Mm.
So there's a lot of different exercises and I do this even before we start processing emotions,
Right.
right? Let's just learn some methods on slowing down the nervous system response to your trauma.
Right.
Because some people, they can smell something and it activates the nervous system.
Right.
Some people can see something. Some people can hear something. Some people can, as they begin talking about it, they begin reliving it.
Mm.
So you have to, first thing, before you open up that door, you have to teach them about how to be in their body, how to create safety in their body. And you'll be surprised how many therapists, like, they don't do this,
Right. Right.
right?
Hmm.
Like, you have to help the person find safety in their body.
Mm.
And so I, I will teach, I'll give them like an option, because there might be about 10 options that, somatic therapists actually use. But you want to pick the one that comes most natural to this person.
Mm.
All right. So, for example, when I was 14, I started running track in high school, and I used to get really nervous right before and sometimes I would jump the gun and stuff like that, right? And so my teacher, my coach, he took me and he taught me how to breathe.
Right.
He was like, do this, right? When you're on the line, breathe like this. That changed my life.
Right. Right.
And I ended up getting third in the state in running the
Mm.
400,
Right.
because I learned how to breathe.
Mm.
So, but that's not everybody's thing, right?
Right.
Some people need cold water, right? Cold water is another way. Putting your face in water is another way. Some people use yoga. Some people use. There's all different types of ways of producing safety in the body. But that, for me, that's the first thing.
Mm.
After knowing your why, after knowing your intention, I immediately start working with the body. Then I go to the emotions.
Right.
All right. Now let's start talking about if you feel safe enough,
Mm.
right? And you've learned this method of being safe in your body. Now let's start processing these emotions,
Mm.
right? Let's start sitting with these painful emotions, right? And if you can, even if you don't want to say it out loud, I need you to recall it,
Mm.
right? Because this is the way that you process. And then, I'll do psychoeducation. I'll teach them about what's happening, how the nervous system works, how the imagination and the memory works with the nervous system,
Mm.
how all of that works, so that they can begin to take these big pieces
Yeah.
of memories, and these big pieces that have not been processed in the short-term memory.
Right.
It's just been stored in the long-term memory.
Right.
And so we have to recall it to short-term to begin to process it.
Right.
And so, in a nutshell, that's my method. The last thing that I actually introduce is the spiritual part,
Mm.
right? Understanding where the nafs is involved in this, where the heart, the spiritual heart is involved in this, and the soul, and how to, use your spiritual strength
Mm.
to overcome these things, right? And
Right.
sometimes you have to teach them, different salawat ala nabi,
Hmm.
saying Allahumma salli wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad, while they're breathing.
Right.
Sometimes you have to, give them dhikr, like
Mm.
teach them, the remembrance of God's names.
Right.
Say these names. These names are known, La Ya Latif,
Mm.
Yes Salam, the giver of
Peace.
peace, and the one who is kind,
Mm.
Latif. You use that to bring to mind that whatever you went through, whatever you are experiencing, that was for you, that it can be overcome. God wants you to overcome it. He wants you to take your tragedy
Right.
and turn it into triumph.
Right.
Right. And so I don't never start with the spiritual thing, because you can easily fall into, pray more, dhikr more, read Quran more, do
That's a
more
when it's
spiritual
such a
stuff.
tricky thing as well, especially within the Muslim community. I don't know, but there's always this narrative that you fell into addiction because your faith wasn't strong enough, XYZ. So a person could be like, "Oh, I do these spiritual acts, my faith will be bigger, my addiction is solved." It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, right? Um, and this is a principle
Mm.
within Islam, right? That we have to try to remember. So if you can think of a traumatic experience during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, right? Think about Uhud,
Mm.
right? The Battle of Uhud, where he told 40 archers, go on that mountain and don't leave that mountain.
Right.
No matter what happens, don't leave that mountain. But they ended up leaving,
Mm.
right? And it led to over 70 Muslims being killed
Right.
that day. Why is that important? Because this is self-inflicted harm.
Right. Right.
They did it to themselves.
Right.
But in the Quran, how did God tell the Prophet Muhammad to deal with his companions even though they had disobeyed? فَبِمَا رَحْمَةً مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. It's by the mercy of God that you are gentle with them.
Mm.
And that verse was revealed as a response to Uhud.
Mm.
So God is telling the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, he's telling him, even though they messed up,
Mm.
you have to continue to be gentle with them.
Right.
That is a lesson for us,
Mm.
that people are going to experiment with drugs. People are going to experiment with pornography.
Right.
People are going to, and every now and then it's going to hook someone.
Right.
We still have the obligation to be gentle with them.
Right. Right.
To be kind to them.
Right.
To help them out.
Right.
Right. And so no one, if someone points the finger at someone and says, "Oh, you did that to yourself. That's what you get." That's more of a reflection on their internal state, their cruel heart,
Right.
than it is the problem that the other person is experiencing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, and that's my approach. That's my approach. I understand. And I guess we have, it looks like we have about 10 minutes left.
Yes.
Or I don't know. We can stay on here as long as you want. Like I don't have much to do, right? But let me just kind of explain for your audience, some of my experience, so they can understand. Like, for me, this is not theoretical for me.
Right.
This is actual. I mean, I have the academic,
Right.
studying, you know what I mean? I'm getting, and inshallah, I'm getting ready to enter into a doctorate program where I can get my
Wow.
doctorate of behavioral health, right? So I have the academic background, but I also have the experiential background. All right. So, I was born into a Muslim family. I'm African American, right? My father became Muslim in the early 70s, and this is a very common experience amongst African Americans.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Islam is the dominant religion in Africa. So wherever there are Black people, there's going to be Islam,
Right.
right? Like you're going to run into some Muslims. It's that simple.
Right.
And so my father was one of those who, even though he grew up in a Christian family and everything, when he found Islam, he just took to it.
Right.
He's okay. This is the religion that I want.
Right.
He met my mother. My mother eventually became Muslim. She's also African American,
Mm.
even though her grandmother is white. So I do have some Irish in my family also.
Mm.
And so I ended up, I was born into a Muslim family, right?
Right.
And for the first 5 grades, I only went to Muslim school.
Right.
It was a shock for me to enter into the public school at 5th grade. It was a shock. It was a complete shock because I was not listening to the music. I was not playing the games between the boys and the girls.
Right.
I didn't know, like I still, my natural state of being was still intact. I
Right.
still had a sense of modesty. I still had a sense of, that haya, like shyness when it came to topics about sex and, stuff like that. Right. So, but in public school, it's in your face.
Mm.
So, my father died when I was about 6 years old. And then my mother ended up remarrying, and she married a man who was very, very abusive. I mean, I have to call it like it was. You know what I mean? He was very, very abusive. I'm not talking about no little abuse. I'm talking about, one time he beat me and my sister so bad, with a belt that we couldn't even sit down on the toilet, right? Because our legs were so swollen that we couldn't bend our knees, right? Like we had to like lay down flat on the bed and have ice put on our legs and stuff like that. And and so I had to experience that for like
Right.
5 or 6 years, until I was able to kind of get old enough and then begin to tell my story.
Right.
But even then, at the age of 16, I'm starting to become a man. I'm starting to fill out a little bit. I'm playing football, and he picked up a stick one time and walked towards me, and everything in me just snapped. It was like I'm about to get him for old and new. Right. Like I'm getting ready to break that stick over his head. You know what I mean? And as he started walking towards me with the stick in his hand, I started walking towards him, and then I saw fear in his face. Right. I saw it. And then he knew the game was up.
Right.
I was a man. And we're not doing this no more. We're not doing this no more. And you're not going to do it to my siblings. This game is over.
Right.
But at the same time, I knew that I had to leave the house, right? Like I knew like it wasn't going to be comfortable with both of us in there, right? So I hit the streets. I was in the streets, and the lowest hanging fruit to survive in the streets is to sell drugs.
Yeah.
My intention was not to be a gangster, was not to be like in the streets, committing crimes and stuff like that. It was just financial for me.
But that's the thing,
the
Ustadh.
streets are the streets.
The streets are the streets.
Yeah.
And that's what people
Streets
don't
are the
understand is that life isn't straightforward for everybody. You don't get the
There you
white
go.
picket
There you
fence.
go.
You don't get the nuclear family. You don't get everything's like rainbows and butterflies.
Right.
It was not that for you. Anybody in
Yeah.
that situation.
And so
yeah.
immediately,
Right.
I'm 16 years old, and immediately I got to start carrying a gun, right? Because somebody tried to jack us, somebody tried to rob us, for our drugs and stuff. So now I got to start carrying a gun.
Wow.
And then, and there were times when, I never shot nobody, but I had to pull it out and threaten people.
Yeah.
Right. And that changes your mentality, right? It changes your
sure.
mentality. And then other bad things happen and you're reacting to it. I remember when I first got into the streets, I really didn't like rap music. I didn't. I liked R&B,
Right.
but I didn't really like rap music.
Right.
But as I began to become more like what the rap is talking about, I began to enjoy it.
Right.
Because now I am living what they're talking about, right?
Right.
So, one thing leads to another. These guys try to kill me. They literally come into my apartment and shoot up the apartment with me in it.
Wow.
And, that triggers something in me because now I want to kill them.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so, thankfully it didn't happen, right? I'm not doing life in prison because, I ended up killing somebody, but I'm telling you these experiences. I've been around people with every type of addiction you can think of.
Right.
I've been, around prostitutes who that's all they use drugs to be able to ply their trade, right?
Right.
That's the only way they can do it. They
Right.
can only sleep with man after man after man after man because they're high, right?
Right.
And so my services was necessary in that, right? So I saw
Right.
that. I saw people that would go out and steal for a living to be able to get drugs.
Oh
I
yeah.
saw people that would rob people to get drugs, right? So I understand how drugs motivates people,
Right.
right? Now, more than that, eventually I got really, really good at selling drugs, right? Because I was like an honest drug dealer, right? That's my Islam. My Islam, right?
You gotta give credit where credit is due.
It's due, right? When I hit the streets, if I said I was going to bring you $1,000 worth of drugs, that's what I would bring you.
Sure.
I'm not going to short you, but in the streets, the game is to short people if you can, right? To overcharge them and stuff like that. And that I didn't function like that. Even though I'm doing something bad, I still had a sense of morality in the way I was doing it, right?
Right.
And so, and then eventually I was able to kind of get out of the streets because, you know, I'm selling more and more and more weight. You know what I mean? And at that level, you're not in the streets. You're not ripping and running in the streets.
Right,
You might
right.
make 2 transactions a month, and you make $500,000 from those 2 transactions.
Wow.
Right? And so eventually I got to that level.
Right.
And then I ended up catching a federal case because we were shipping drugs from LA to Philadelphia, and it went bad. And so, you know, I was the only one that they caught on my case. And my case is online. Like, I don't, you know, you can go and read it. Right? You can type in my name, United States versus Tabari Zahir, and it's right there, right? I ended up going to trial. I lost trial, and I was given 18 years in prison. Thankfully, I didn't have to do all of that time because Obama came to office. When Obama came to office, you know, he gave an administrative decree that helped out about maybe 10,000 of us that were in the federal system, and we ended up we were able to get released early and come home. So I don't know what your politics are, but Obama helped me. You know, he helped me a lot. So I ended up coming home 7 years early. So I did do 11 years and 3 months in prison. But this was the defining factor for me, because I had a chance to kind of study Islam before I went to prison. Right? I had a chance. I understood the Islamic sciences. I knew enough. By the time I went into prison, I already knew enough to be an imam. Right?
Oh, wow.
I already knew how to read Arabic.
Oh
yeah. I already knew how to read Arabic. I was already studying some of the text at Zaytuna Institute. I was studying with scholars. I was beginning to memorize text. It was just I was living a double life. Right? Yeah. And I'm giving you the short version, right? Because around 21, I stopped. All the way up until about 26 or 27. I had stopped. I was done with the drug game.
Right.
But it came back. You know what I mean? Because I didn't deal with the greed that came from when I was a teenager, right? Yeah. You're 19 years old and you're making $25,000 a month. That does something to you, right? It does something to you, right? And this is back in the 90s, you know? Right. And so we like to make that kind of money now. You know? What about the 90s?
I don't encourage drug dealing, but, you know, inflation is high.
Inflation is high, man. So this is what really turned everything for me, because I was the most knowledgeable wherever I went, you know, in the prison system. I was always the imam. I was always the leader, right? And, you know, in prison, there's a lot of people that become Muslim. A lot of people become Muslim all the time. Right. And what ends up happening is that you end up being their imam, their counselor, their mentor, their father, their teacher, their brother. And they tell you things that they've never been able to tell anyone. They tell you that their mother was a crackhead growing up, and they had to learn. If they didn't steal from the store, they wouldn't eat. Right? They had to steal bread and bologna from the store every 3 days to be able to survive. And I had to be confronted with the blood money that I was making off of situations like this, right? And it kept happening. I would talk to this guy, same story. This guy, same story. Against this guy, same story. This guy, same story. Until it was just like, my repentance became a lifestyle.
Right.
It was like, the only way you can repent from this is that you've got to help everybody that you come across that has been affected by it.
Right.
Because I wasn't, I started off as like this petty drug dealer,
Right.
but eventually we were moving weight
Right.
that makes cities, that affects the way the drug trade is happening in cities.
Right.
We
Right.
were supplying millions of dollars worth of cocaine to cities across the country,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so the only way that I could see to fix that was to give back this way.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I understand the people that I'm dealing with. I understand the problems. And now I've been given a chance to give back in this way.
Right.
And I don't care who I'm dealing with. I tell my story freely, right? You can find my story online. You know what I mean? I've told my story in audiences in front of 1,000 people. I don't care about that because I feel like I'm a credible messenger. There's nothing this young kid is going to tell me about the streets.
Right.
There's nothing. You're not going to tell me about the girls because I already know. You're not going to tell me about the drugs. You're not going to tell me about the guns. You're not going to tell me about the clubs. You're not going to tell me about the music. You're not going to tell me about corruption. You're not going to tell me about dirty cops. This I know.
Right.
But so don't be afraid to tell me anything.
Right.
And when they come to me, believe you me, they tell me everything. Stuff I'll be like, oh, what? You came from a middle-class family, man. How did this happen? But still, there's no judgment. There's no judgment.
The trauma
There's no
spans
judgment.
all the way upwards. I see more and more people who come from all walks of life that, for again, one reason or the other, the trauma has gotten to them, and addiction becomes their only relief. Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true. And so, I've taken it on. It's a personal mission for me to help as many as I can, and that's what I'm doing. However I can. That's my mission. So once we get Southern California under control, we got 20 million people here, but once we get this under control, probably my next step will be Texas. Right?
Yes,
Because we have a huge Muslim
please.
community there too.
I mean, that's the thing.
So,
This is one of those things. Like, I am so grateful that for what you do with Lamps of Light. It is an integral part. I mean, yes, for the Muslim community, for sure, but it is a need, unfortunately, that is universal. People need help with this. They need help with everything that sort of, the cards that we are dealt. And that's the thing. It's not that everybody has trouble. We don't know the kind of trauma and experiences other people go through and how the kind of impact, just like you, as you described, what you had gone through, the kind of impact it had on you. It changes a person for sure. And again, I am so grateful for what you do, for everybody at Lamps of Light, what they do. So please tell my audience where they can find you, where they can find Lamps of Light on social media if they wish to just connect, or even if they need help. Please tell us where we can find you.
Right. Okay, so our we have a website, and that's like our center of truth.
Right.
We try to get everybody to go to the website. It's www.lampsoflight.org. Right, so that's www.lampsoflight.org. And as soon as you go onto the website, we will give anyone who needs a free consultation. It's a 30-minute consultation.
Right.
And what I try to do is just kind of conceptualize their case and then give them just like a quick solution that hopefully they can do on their own.
Right.
But if they do need professional help, then we can talk about setting up a schedule and helping them out with that. On social media, same thing. On Instagram, it's Lamps of Light Project. On TikTok, it's Lamps of Light Project. On YouTube, it's Lamps of Light Project. We're slowly, coming with more content, to be able to help more and more people. We're in the process right now of opening an outpatient center right now, here in Southern California, in Riverside, California. Like literally, the contractor's over there right now putting in the floor. You know what I mean? And so we're going to be hiring therapists. We're going to be hiring, peer navigators. We're going to be hiring case managers, to just begin to take on, because like right now we have a waiting list,
Oh,
right? We have
wow.
a waiting list right now.
Right.
So we have to expand. And, God is good, right? We were able to get a grant that gets us off the ground
Right.
and it pays for all of our expenses for 2 years.
Oh, that's
So,
fantastic.
yeah, so we'll be able to expand and offer more services. So yeah, you guys, if your audience would like to, they can donate, right?
Right.
There's a donate button there too, right? Give us $5, give us $10, you know what I mean? Because we have a huge mission
Right.
ahead of us. We have a huge mission ahead of us. So however people can help, we will appreciate it.
For sure.
Thank you.
And everybody can see those links on the screen. They will also be in our show notes. I'll put a donation link in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Ustadh
Okay.
Zahir, for being here with us, for sharing all of this information. Again, I can't thank y'all enough for all that you do. It is so integral, especially, with everything that is changing so rapidly. Whoever needs the help, they'll be able to reach out to you, can get the help that they need, because we need it for sure. And thank you to everybody who's listened
Yeah.
in and watched us on YouTube. Y'all take care of yourself and may peace be on you all.